Так, мы посмотрели с вами ролик, давайте.
Very well then, after the video, we shall now talk about new models of economic cooperation in the context of global crisis, which is indeed the title of our second day of conference. Let me introduce the speakers for this discussion. Timur Suleimanov, the Minister in charge of Economy and Financial Policy of the Eurasian Economic Commission, Alexander Shokin, President of the Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs, Mr. Trento Klima, and then Mauro Moretti is on his way, the CEO and General Manager of Leonardo Finmeccanica. I hope he'll join us soon, so as to react to our questions. So, Alexander Nikolaevich, if I may, I'd like to give you the floor first, because I think that we should talk about economy and our mutual wishes. What do you think is to expect with reference to Russia? Because this is certainly the subject matter of President Putin's speech. One of the main idea for the development of cooperation between our partners in the West and ourselves is aimed at developing technology lines and promoting exchange of technologies, which is exactly what we are expecting, what may support us at this time of crisis. The crisis obviously has hit us all. The crisis is indeed both general and specific, because for some the crisis reduces the pace of economic growth, and for others it brings about also the possibility to be disconnected from the development of new technologies. What are we talking about now for the present? Thank you, President. Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The Eurasian Forum is very much focused on, obviously, Eurasia and Europe, of course. I think that we shall talk about the Russian economy for long years at the forum, and October is a very good opportunity to talk about new prospects. Why is that? Well, because it is in October that when in Russia the budget law is approved, and now we have a 3-year plan for our budget law. The budget law used to be debated in spring, but now all takes place later on, and the first drafts of the budget law are usually debated later during the year. So everything happens in October. So as from next week, we're going to start and finalized, and then the document is going to be tabled to the Duma, to the lower chamber of Parliament. Now, here are my slides. Let me highlight that the critical elements of the Russian economy are not the consequences of the drop in oil prices or the sanctions. Indeed, since 2012, we saw that the dynamics of the main economic parameters dropped and declined, so much so that many important parameters started again dwindling, as for example own capital. And many other parameters, again, were all dwindling. The Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs monitors the business structure on a regular basis, and ever since 2012, our surveys detected a similar trend. Now, as for short-term forecasts, well, there is moderate optimism. Just this week, our government has published its forecast for the next few years, and official forecasts refer to a growth by 0.06. In 2018 it's going to be 1.5, and in 2019 slightly more than 2%. So we might say that we are pretty much in line with Europe, but the ambitions of Russians in a way state us that we are halfway through between Germany and China. We can outdo Germany, but we are still too slow vis-à-vis China. Now, with reference to the Russian business community, well, of course, we cannot but be concerned for the lack of foreseeability of the economic policy of our authority. Just 2 years ago, President Putin had promised the business community not to increase tax rates, but whenever the budget law is being debated in the parliament, they're always mentioning the possibility to increase rates. And now this year they wanted to increase VAT from 18 to 20% and to have a progressive tax rate on the personal income tax. Insurance premiums are also on the increase. So this obviously corresponds to growing taxes, but the government decided not to increase taxes. The government decided to have a different tax policy. I wish to highlight then that year on year we are always very uncertain as to what happens with our tax policy. And the geopolitical situation is extremely confused. The market situation globally is very confused, which obviously adds on to our uncertainty, with negative impact on our medium to long-term plans. Now, talking about the outstanding issues, I have to also refer to the losses of the business community, which are pretty high, and this is due also to the interest rates. Earlier on, the high interest rates were offset by low interest rate on foreign financing, and many Russian corporations in retrofitting the technology project would involve also foreign investments, using, for example, foreign investment with loans coming from outside. This obviously is over. The average tax on loans for small to medium-sized enterprises is of about 15%, and based on the result of last year, despite the fact that inflation is going down. And this is going to be a record low inflation this year, 5.78, which is a record low in terms of inflation for us. And next year and for the following 3 years, it should be around 4%. The interest rate is still a double digit. It's going to be double digit, i.e. around 10%. And we expect that interest rates will be connected again to the inflation rate. What is the problem for the business community? Well, we probably feel the need for middle management. This is an ongoing problem. Also, in the past, we went through very critical years, and we saw that the lack of middle managers brings about a delay in the retrofitting of the company. The Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs are working together to draft professional standards listing certain or a checklist of certain requirements for our managers. And as from January 1st, a new law will be passed on independent expert opinion. So we talked about the tax burden, which is still a problem, and the tariffs of monopolies. This is another outstanding problem, apparently, for the next 5 years. The monopoly tariffs will follow the law of inflation minus, but we don't understand, we still haven't decided as a minus what, minus 25%. This is our forecast. Now, referring to the main drivers of economic growth and this time of complex economic crisis, I would like to refer to President Putin's statement. He said that the main driver is that of economic freedom. So we expect an enhancement of the entrepreneurial climate. So together with the government, we have to work on universal methods so as to grant support to entrepreneurs. And so there are many constraints under which we have to operate, but we see a dramatic change. And this is something that we have to expect and have to bear fruit long term. This month we shall work at the Council of State meeting for the enhancement of the business environment in the different areas of the Russian Federation. And there, not only will we talk about the drafting of the new laws, and we're going to talk also about the setting up of new task force to carry out this work. Now, let me spend just a few comments on our international commitments. There are negative factors affecting our business. For example, as for the customs duty, we rank 15 worldwide. But in the framework of the Eurasian Economic Community and at different fora, such as the G20, well, Russia within these fora is ready to be active soon, especially to implement the 3 facilitation agreements that was signed 3 years ago. This is the official stance of our government, in a way. Our government wishes to use our internal laws, especially within the standards of the OECD. Despite our involvement of being frozen, Russian standards will be based on international standards to a large extent. And having said as much, I think that my presentation is over, but I have a question that I would like to raise immediately, if I may. Well, first of all, I'd like to tell everybody that the floor is open for Q&A time as soon as the presentation is over. Obviously, you have to get a hold of the microphone before you voice your question. Obviously, other questions can be raised also at the end of the session, but if you have specific questions for individual speakers, you're all invited to raise your questions as soon as the presentation is over. So now, going back to my question, I would like to know what you think as a delegate of an important organization gathering together many large-sized companies in Russia, and I believe that this is going to be of interest also for our Italian friends. So as a matter of fact, we are trying to curb inflation so as to reach record low levels for Russia. But don't you think that this is going also to bring about a reduction in the demand? Because, of course, we also have to consider the needs of our internal population. So certainly we're never going to reach a zero level of inflation, certainly as far as we are alive at least, but a low inflation year on year, and I'd like to remind you the figures that the central bank and the government is going to have for the next few years, a level of some 4% of our inflation. Well, that is a record low, but that doesn't mean that demand will be curbed. Indeed, the demand can still be alive and kicky, and with constantly and consistently low inflation, we can also reduce interest rates. Interest rates, therefore, can be reduced to 5–6%, which will enable Russian corporations to make important investments, especially with reference to the short to medium term plans. So I believe that inflation ranging between 3.5 and 4% is going to make this possible. So is there no risk of the reduction of the demand? Do you think that the demand is going to be balanced? Well, I believe that demand in Russia is certainly a very severe problem, is a severe issue, a serious issue, and this is indeed one of the main hindrances to economic development or growth. The lack of demand coming from outside, considering that, again, we only have to consider our energy requirements. I hope that the Nord Stream 2 project is not going to be blocked. There's a desire of Europe to discontinue the supply coming from Russia, but this is something that we can perceive strong, but we cannot rely basically on the demand as coming from Europe. So we cannot expect an increase in our demand. And we know that also the growth of worldwide is certainly very limited at the present point in time. So we're trying to promote credit to consumption. But I believe that the demand is going to be kept at a reasonable level because of, or thanks to the curbing of the inflation rate. Well, the demand might be curbed, but there is also a counter trend in that there are many factors pointing to the increase or the strengthening of demand. Thank you. So we were expecting also the Matteo Renzi, but he is now working with European partners. And as from yesterday, we learned that the Italian Prime Minister expressed against the prolongation of sanctions against Russia with reference to the Syrian crisis, because apparently additional sanctions had to be raised against Russia. And this was a proposal on the part of European leaders, but the Italian Prime Minister said that there's no point in raising sanctions against Russia with reference to the situation in crisis in Syria. So Mr. Moretti has joined us, the CEO and General Manager of Leonardo Finmeccanica. He has just joined us, and I'd like to address myself to you, Mr. Moretti. What are the main problems as seen by Italian partners when dealing with Russia? And in general, we have a problem, obviously, of economic growth because of the global crisis, and this should obviously trigger some changes. What do you think such changes could be, given the present situation? What do you think we're going to see as factors of change? Now, Mr. Moretti, you work with Russia, you've been cooperating with Russia for many years. Are there things that you like about Russia? Are there things that you don't like? And what should be changed in our relationships? Thank you.
That's a complex question, I must say, which really makes me give up what I had been jotting down in my notes, and which makes me answer directly. Now, my problem is that the world is changing at a speed which is highly impressive. And although we have lots of experts and scholars who try and detect the direction and the results, the outcomes, no one is in a position of saying what will happen 10 years from today. Now, the only certain thing is that there is a general shift towards a rebalancing of well-being. And in the first place, we know that there was a strong lack of balance in Western world countries. Now, this is something which is getting straight once again. It's being rebalanced. In a couple of decades, hunger, the worldwide famine, has been reduced, and the scale is definitely very much smaller than a few years ago. And in many countries, Asian countries especially, we know that it has been possible to pile up sufficient assets and wealth so as to readjust the fundamental systems governing their countries, starting from the education systems and the research and development systems. We no longer are in a situation where, on the one side, we have the wealthy and rich Western world, which was well-educated, capable of promoting the best technologies as well. Nowadays, as a matter of fact, in many other countries, Russia is, to my own view, already a Western country, but already in many other Asian countries, this is something which is possible. Asian countries are growing, are advancing, progressing. And in less than probably a decade, we will see that the resources available to research and development, technological development especially, in all of these countries, Asian continent countries, is going to be exceeding the amounts made available by North America, United States and Canada, and the European Union. And obviously this will bring about totally different scenarios, because the equilibria, the balance existing from the economic point of view, which is what allows us to make forecasts, is what will change expectations, hypotheses. The future scenarios, in other words, are going to change. And you probably know that expecting and making predictions about scenarios is what affects our choices, political choices, entrepreneurial choices, business choices, investment choices are going to be affected. Now, this is the first issue that we have to deal with. Right now, we are in the middle of a transition phase. And it is almost natural for rich and wealthy countries to feel besieged, whilst the formerly poor, ex-poor countries are sort of boosting up their own activities and accelerating. Now, if we have to consider the United States of America and the elections, the pending election system, we may find a new interpretation key and think that each one of the Italian citizens and all of the political top summit players well understand that they will no longer be the leaders of the world in less than a decade. Now, at this speed, Asia will be in a position of reaching more than 25 billions of, trillions of domestic product, gross domestic products against North America, which is going to be 15 after the Brexit from European Union. And in less than a couple of decades, we will see that the whole Asian continents will have the possibility of producing wealth and asset and thus bypass the Western world. This is going to be the result of the urbanization, the democratic procedures and processes that we well know, and the spread of new technologies that no longer can be stopped by borders, borders of countries, geographical borders. And whenever we are speeding up the additive manufacturing, there will no longer be a problem in terms of borders and duties, customs. There is a design, there is a planning, a project, a design, in other words, which will immediately, through the cyber world, is going to reach the hub of the 3D producer, and it's going to produce and manufacture the product. In the plastic sector, for example, there are some systems right now where there are problems not great problems, honestly, but there's going to be an improvement whereby we know that other processes will allow us to still have products that are highly resilient and resistant. Now, having this platform, the elements that need to be considered and here I'm diving into the problem of our relations with Russia, because this is a transition period, as I said. Either we put right the relations, or we are running the risk of having beautiful meetings but never getting understood, never getting messages across. And the problem is one of intellectual property and ownership. It's not that you invest €1 billion and then somehow you think that this €1 billion needs not to be protected or be part of a stake as if that were just a normal commodity good. Now, it's on this basis, on the basis of any such elements, i.e. the essential aspects of knowledge, development of relations, it is important for us to find a way to come to a clear-cut conclusion of our relations and a redefinition. Otherwise, we take so many directions, different directions, and whereby, thanks to the logic of the transfer of technologies, it is going to be possible to think that just anyone who's invested $1 billion on the next day will make it available, which is not true, as we well know. So then what to do? And here we come to the problem, to the knot. We have to have a political atmosphere which is highly positive. It goes without saying. And I believe that as far as these two countries, our two countries, there is such a propensity, there is such an inclination. The European Union, and we know that there needs to be some courage to do so. Well, what we are doing here is the evidence of the existence of good relations amongst our two countries, and relations were kept that way in dramatic moments. So we have to understand that, as I am convinced, no one can make a free gift to the other one, but rather we have to enter into partnership agreements that have to be crystal clear and long-lasting, so as to develop new technologies, new knowledge, new insight. I think that this is where is the crucial aspect that needs to be dealt with. There are many other things that have got to do with other issues which are less strategic, less important. So in our case, there is the possibility of having the possibility of going back and allowing for a discussion. And as Leonardo Finmeccanica Group, on the one side, I did offer that, I asked for that. There is a way to deal with the technological issues that are not being dealt with right now. It is true that we do have some chapters that won't be touched, such as the defense chapter, but many other things, such as the dual role technology, which could be placed back at the center of the debate, could allow us to sort of foresee or get a glimpse at least the fact that in the modern world, where there are no real physical borders, at least, or political borders, if you wish, because the information technology is by now overriding just everything and no one can stop it, it is going to be necessary to build up global value chains which, by just resting upon the so-called real asset, the fact of belonging to a system, for example, is in a position of understanding and seizing and getting hold of the highest levels, value chains at the top levels, so as to be competitive with the rest of the other competitors. And I believe that in this adventure there still are some maneuvering room. There is some maneuvering room, which is important on the side of Russia, Italy, and other European countries. Now, this is to the advantage of the benefit that Europe could crop. Now, all of us Europeans have to understand that we are the only ones who are not growing. This is why we see the entire world as if it were in a crisis, but it's not so. The world is relatively alive. There is probably not going to be a typical Chinese expansion as we saw in the last century, but there are rhythms that are very high in terms of expansion. So we have to make this quantum leap towards a true unity, because having prepared the conditions for the joining in of 28 countries, thanks to the euro. So we either go towards the union, or this is going to be a straitjacket, an explosive straitjacket, because inequalities, internal inequalities, are so many, and the common euro, without any political shock absorber, will bring about inequalities, disparities amongst those who started off from a strong position, i.e. without debts, and those who still have to pay them and high interests, because this is a way that will not allow us to fund and finance research and development. So in the end, we will see new capabilities and new potentials in the field of having equal weapons and equal tools for research and development. I believe that this is something that we have to deal with. If we don't, we will be having difficulties in finding solutions for the growth of this country. Now, yesterday, in a different press conference, I did take the liberty of saying that if in the United States, a country like California, a state like California is going to go bankrupt, then the Confederation is going to step in and help that country. That country is not going to be just ousted. And if there is a region or a state that's going to be highly indebted more than others, obviously there is going to be a north-south situation, which is what happened in Italy. But if this is not happening in Europe in a substantial way, and even the famous Juncker plan is finding difficulties in the rebalancing itself, then quite obviously the divides are going to be stronger and stronger. And this will also be to the effect of what is going to be the common policies of other external countries, such as sanctions. On the one side, it is possible to bear them, and in other cases or sides, it's not going to be possible. I believe that this is the true place where to still have new profitable relations, and as Leonardo Finmeccanica, we're doing that in the field of aeronautics, cyberspace, helicopters, and I do believe that this is the right moment to do something to relaunch our policies towards the same directions, those directions. So many thanks. You are a true entrepreneur, a businessman. You still talk about opportunities. You are looking for them. But in Russia, we tend to say only too often that those who don't want to do something look for an explanation. Those who are wanting to do that are trying to find opportunities. I'm looking at it from a different angle. Now, according to you, what kind of difficulties do we have right now? What is it that could prevent us from developing cooperation? Are there mechanisms maybe that are not perfect yet? Or are there hampers, obstacles of a bureaucratic nature? Only too often officers may say something and then other officers will backpedal. Now, I believe that this kind of reply entails a change in our speed, advancement speed, but the decision-making timing is much too long. We have to take a step forwards. We have to make leaps forward. We have positive experiences, but we have great difficulties in coming and getting results. Decision-making centers and hubs have to be better coordinated, better unified. They have to join forces, especially whenever referring to a set of agreements that have to be made and entered in the industrial fields. This is to make the operations more effective, obviously, the ongoing ones. And obviously, Rosneft, we know that this is something which is instrumental to strategic operations in Russia, the exploration of the seas, the Arctic seas, and on the other side, also in the Black Sea. I believe that that stands as an opportunity to prove and try and allow for higher flexibility and higher increased speed to all of these relations, trying to overcome bureaucratic stalls, and this is what will prevent us from reaching quick results, and in parallel to build up joint actions that will lead to technological development. Now, if only we could do that, it's going to be to the mutual benefit.
Any questions from the floor? Any question to Mr. Moretti? If that is not the case, then I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Timur Suleimanov, who's the Minister in charge of Economy and Financial Policy of the Eurasian Economic Commission. have a question. In contemporary world, building technology change and the processing of raw material obviously may create added value and make economic operation among the states more efficient. What is happening at the moment now with reference to integration in the post-Sovietic area provides us with opportunity and with a possibility to show our Western partners that we are very capable to trigger these processes. So my question is the following. Have we been successful along these lines? Can you come up with some proposals to table to our European partners or Western partners so that politics doesn't scare us any longer? Thank you. Thank you for your question. If I may, I'd like to start referring to from the simple things to the more complex things. I would like to refer to the technology process that are typical of economic integration, and I shall certainly talk about that. But traditionally, I always come at this forum year on year, and as members of the Eurasian Economic Commission, we always use this forum so as to share information with our Italian partners and develop relationships with them. So I'd like to say what has changed vis-à-vis last year. Last year we were expecting to develop our common market for gas and oil products or byproducts, and there is a program to develop a common market for energy sources that are, of course, main energy resources. But when we refer to a common market, we also refer to accessibility to this market with all the advantages that derive from the very concept of a common market. As of last year, an idea was tabled to establish again an energy market, and where we obviously wish to be active soon. There's a strong degree of interconnection among the member countries to this market, and this has always been the case ever since the Soviet area. But there are a number of technology constraints that we have to consider, especially when we establish national markets. Within this union, now we are establishing the common market, and that enables us to be active swiftly. Our deadline would be 2019. The competitiveness of our company, the possibility to transfer energy sources between nearly and the other at accessible price is all the benefit that is granted by being members to a common market. We drafted a document on transport. You know that our economic union is wide, very extensive, with over 20 million square kilometers. So infrastructures are a prerequisite. We have to have infrastructures to develop our potential, and we have again to develop, for example, the Silk Route. We have close ties with the Western world, of course, and we have to make sure that this bridge, and we want to establish a bridge, we want this bridge to be operational without any hindrance, so as to establish again a common market. So the program had been tabled, and these are the changes vis-à-vis next year. And we're now, of course, looking at all the directions. We are looking at sea transportation, air transportation, rail transportation. So we wish to establish common markets, not just for transporters, for the carriers, but also for those who will work with them. There's another important element that I wish to stress. 43 different industries were admitted to the common market of services. So altogether, this implies over 50% of the volume of services of our common market. Our European colleagues probably understand that this implies the possibility to provide such services across the borders. with the acknowledgement of certifications that are automatically recognized and acknowledged in other countries. So there's no need, for example, having access to Armenia, you don't have to ask for admission to Belarus, because again, they are member to the same common market, so being granted one authorization implies that you don't require any further authorization. And this provides us with a very good opportunity, not only in terms of manufacturing of goods, but also in terms of industrial products and services especially, and in terms of also intellectual property. So there's a common market of jobs. In 2014, the bases were laid with the signing of an agreement, and as from this year, we see that this is actually operational. All the benefits that are granted to the citizens of our states, for example, social security and healthcare, education, not just for workers, but also for the members of their families. Well, all this has worked and has been successful. Migration towards Russia has doubled because, again, there are many job seekers, especially in the relationship between Russia and Kazakhstan. There has been also an increase in people migrating from Russia to Kazakhstan. I look at the statistics and looking at the relationship between Kazakhstan and Armenians. Armenians have started looking for jobs, and they have found jobs in Kazakhstan 8 times as much as previously. This means that the barriers, the legal, social barriers that existed previously and that were important, thanks to the entering into this agreement, have done away with. So the common market for employment is really working. And what Alexander Shokin was saying are probably nothing but exceptions that confirm the rules. So certainly it is true that middle management is lacking. It is true that we probably lack experienced and experts middle management. But I'm sure that we shall solve this problem thanks again to the establishment of this common employment market. As for education, this already is a truism. It is guaranteed. So my diploma, for example, as a law expert or as an economist, as I'm a citizen of Kazakhstan and having studied in Kazakhstan, well, all my diplomas are recognized in all the 4 countries members to the Union. And this obviously is another main quantum leap. This is another important progress that we have scored. Now, we're trying to copy what happens in the European Union, of course, because the European Union is set an example and has to overcome the problem of many members with different laws. But we have established also a financial market, which is another important building block in our union. There are 10 documents that are being studied at the moment, that they are drafting, so as to have harmonization of the legislation with reference to the credit sector, the banking sector, the security sector, infrastructures, exchange of creditworthiness of bank clients. So there are 10 documents being studied that are very close to completion and that are going to be finalized as from next year. So this is another important success of the establishment of our common market. And now, with reference to foreign trade, well, on October 5th, our Commission has been informed that the agreement with Vietnam has been ratified, and this is a first this is the first important success. Indeed, we have signed this agreement with a third party, so the agreement has been ratified. As from October 6th, we enjoy free trade rules with Vietnam with a third party. So our companies, all the companies of our union, have a privileged path, but they enjoy some kind of privileges when accessing the Vietnamese market. Obviously, this is not time for planned economy, so we cannot tell companies you have to set aside some capital. Well, of course, we cannot plan things from scratch. There are many factors that play a role. There are going to be funds as they exist in the European Union, and those are going to be factors guiding companies to follow certain routes. Mr. Moretti said that intellectual property accounts for some 40–30% of the success. Well, nobody's going to invest any money unless there's a legal system safeguarding, protecting the patent, protecting the license, or the intellectual property. Obviously, not being equipped with such a system, obviously nobody is going to come to you with their innovation. Well, our union, our commission does enjoy a patent office. There is the Eurasian Mark with acknowledging the origin of the products. So this is going to safeguard intellectual property. What are the lines for the future? Well, I believe it is high time we establish structural funds within the Eurasian Economic Union. As is true in many other cases, the synergy has to be developed with the European Union. We fully understand that we are not certainly inventing the wheel again. We are not going to waste time. But we shall enjoy the cooperation with our European colleagues. We shall enjoy their recommendation and consultation so as to be as effective as possible. At one of the UN conference referring to sustainable development, a reference was made to the role of regional organizations who reach such objectives. Well, I believe that not only do we support aid to Haiti that was hit by a natural disaster. Not only do we have to try and improve the situation in Sudan, as a Eurasian Economic Union, we can do many things by ourselves. We have managers, we have scholars and scientists, so that innovation and funds are triggered. But if we act individually, probably it will take longer. So in order for development to be sustainable, we have to enjoy also some kind of mutual help mechanism so that we can act more swiftly and so that we can be as close as possible to the standard of Western Europe. Thank you. Thank you. And I also have a question again to raise. When the world economy is expanding, cooperation among countries and unions is obviously to the benefit of all, whether it is cooperation between the regional organizations such as the Eurasian Economic Commission and the European Union, or cooperation among different companies or different countries. This certainly goes to the benefit. But at a time of crisis, this also entails additional risks. So basically, if there is a stagnation in one country, there's stagnation also in the other countries. As for example, if Russia is hit by crisis, then the neighboring countries, or Kazakhstan or Belarus, are going to be hit by the crisis as well. Do you think this is the case? I would like to hear your point on the subject now. I'm not going to just take commonplaces. There are many who believe that crisis can be a challenge and also an opportunity, also a threat and opportunity. Well, as a matter of fact, our attitude as the European Economic Commission, well, we believe that crises come and go, whereas the advantages of integration are there to stay. So you can basically enter into this cooperation project at a different point in time, but the situation doesn't change. I mean, the benefit that can be drawn from cooperation are, again, there to stay. A foreign market at a time of crisis can become less accessible. And so the home market has to be strengthened. So it is true that in Russia there are 142, 143 million potential consumers, but within the Union we have as many as 182 million consumers. So if you understand these 182 million consumers function as a single economic mechanism, and the fact of being able to access them all for our corporations, for our business community, well, this is an important help also to overcome the crisis. This is something that we can do. Thank you. More questions? Please raise your hand if your questions are for Mr. Suleimanov. I see that there is a request for the floor. Fortunately, I can't see very clearly, but please raise your question. State actually to whom you'd like to address your question, and maybe you can also introduce yourself.
Да, микрофон включите, пожалуйста. Сейчас вам второй микрофон дадут.
Please wait for a new microphone to be given to you, so that a working microphone, hopefully.
Техника тоже иногда устает.
Well, technology is failing us. We're eager to listen to your question because, you know, a conversation actually it thrives on face-by-face dialogue. So can we hear this question? So state your question and I'll repeat it at the mic so that everybody shall hear it and the interpreters as well. Then, Mrs. Ilaria Vesco, President of the Technical Group for Internationalization of Confindustria Territories in Madam Vescovi, how do you think the crisis is affecting you? And so we'll give the floor first to Mrs. Vescovi and then we'll hear the question. Thank you.
So we have to understand the relations amongst our country. In the first place, let me say good morning, and let me thank for this invitation addressed to me by Mr. Falligo. I would like to greet you on behalf of Vincenzo Boccia, the President of Confindustria, CEO of Confindustria, and especially the President of Union of Entrepreneurs, Mr. Shocking. And I do know that he has and he entertains contacts that are very careful and that carefully look after the relations between us. Now, how is the situation between businesses in Russia and in Italy? What kind of situation are we witnessing? Well, I believe that our relations are definitely very much existing and present. It should suffice to think that in the Russian federations there are ongoing productive investments by Italian businesses equal to some 10 billions and a half of euros. There are some 570 businesses that are present in the Russian federations with 51 staff members, with 51 workers, which is incredible considering what in the past 3 years has been the situations, the economic situation that we have witnessed and suffered. Now, if we add to this other companies, businesses that have trading relations, we reach the incredible number of 21,000 businesses present in that territory. This is something that is the evidence of a stability of the relations existing between our two countries. Notwithstanding what happened in the year 2015, Italy still was the fifth supplier of the Federation, the Russian Federation, and the third client. There is an interchange, or there is a trading exchange that has gone down to 21 billion euros, which was cut by almost a third. But nonetheless, the data, the numerical data, still allow us to look at the Russian Federation with great attention and with great trust and hope. Unfortunately, the crisis was began with the Ukrainian-Russian crisis in the year 2013, and that on top of that we had sanctions, counter-sanctions, the devaluation of the ruble, the going down of the price of oil barrels, which entailed important losses. In the year 2014, we lost some almost €1,200 million. In the year 2015, that loss went up to $2.5 billion. So we have been piling up net losses equal to more than $3.5 billion in terms of exports towards Russia. This gives us the shiver. In the first 6 months of the year 2016, we lose another extra 7%. Notwithstanding all this, I must say that we still look at that geographical area with trust, hope, and attention, great attention. There are lots of perspectives because the direction taken by our companies, not only large companies that are the leaders and that have important settlements and that are sort of the bandwagons of the entire sector. And I'm referring to small and medium businesses because they made lots of efforts. Their process in order to access the Russian market was long, time-consuming, costly. And I would like to say that this maybe is the most important thing, whereby these companies represent a strong leading aspect, a strong bandwagon. But then there are many more examples, and here I'm referring especially to the agreements that were recently signed. 9 agreements were recently signed in the Forum of St. Petersburg by Italian companies. Italy was the guest of honor, and there were 21 excellencies, Italian excellencies, that were attending the forum, 9 of which were companies that did sign international agreements, trading agreements. Again, this happened in the year 2016, just a few months ago. Now, all of them are examples that make us have good hopes and be positive about what's going on. Now, one of the opportunities out of which even the Italian companies may be getting some stimuli, extra stimuli, is represented by the document which envisages, especially as far the replacement of our relations by allowing for local settlements. So in the year 2014, a new document that was signed in Russia envisages by the year that is coming the possibility of replacing all this with direct settlements is what stands for an excellent opportunity for our companies having their own skills and technologies and competences that until now have been and are still very much appreciated. And I believe that this is what will allow us to make good what was a loss that piled up in past years. In the year 2016, our data, we've seen a strong trend, negative trend. Hopefully, this trend is going to go to zero and to be zeroed down, especially in the rubber, plastic, transportation sector. The situation seems to be already changing and almost reversing. So this is what is comforting us. Now, obviously, and reassuring us, this is obviously not allowing us to make exception from this political situation. And even our Prime Minister, the only European leader who attended the Forum of St. Petersburg, is the one who imparted a great impetus to our efforts. Our own confederation, and especially the German association, is making strong pressures upon their own governments so as to appeal to their responsibility and accountability so as to invert this dramatic trend and this dramatic situation. And I know that this is something which is entailing a time-consuming kind of effort. We will have to play our own role. We probably are not going to be the leaders or the main players, but we can only still go on believing, proving, and bringing new results, trying to reach new results with great farsightedness. We should try and do our best to prove that the economy is sort of picking up, if not speeding up. So we have to prove and give evidence that our skills are going to be the evidence, notwithstanding the many limits that were imposed upon us, the many limitations. And we have, as I said, to take into account the strong damage suffered by our own companies and collaborators and workers. Thank you. Thank you very much. In the first place, let me say thank you for what you said, for the kind words, for the contribution also on the side of the Russian authorities, meant to facilitate the access of Western companies and businesses into and to the Russian market. It is often said that we will be happy to see in Russia the representatives of the Russian businesses who will have the opportunity of sort of sharing their own technologies, contribute with their own technologies, if not exchange them. Now, if Italy is ready, I wonder whether this exchange could stand as a new economic cooperation model, a model which will allow us to protect ourselves and to hedge ourselves from political risks. Well, yes, the Italian businesses are more than ready. The Italian businesses have shown, thanks to the results that they've cropped in the past years, that they are not only ready, but also available and very much careful and attentive to any such changes and evolutions. Before the crisis, Italy, within the European Union, was the country that was having the growth of its own shares and quota of imports. There was a growth in that sense. And thanks to that trading activity and interchange or exchange, it was possible for Italy to be appreciated on the Russian market. Now we have to take a different speed. We have to prove and we have to show that we are capable of accessing the Russian markets and together with the Russian companies, with new partners, with new partnerships and collaborations, we have to prove that we can meet the needs, the new needs, and meet the challenge. I must say that Confindustria, together with the Economic Ministry of Development and together with ICE, the Foreign Trade and Exchange Institute, to try and allow all of the Italian companies to acquire this new kind of sensitivity. In the month of November, next November, we've organized 4 different events in the most important cities in the north of Italy. And it's going to be sort of a roadshow, showing what are the possibilities to invest, because in Russia there have been new facilitation tools made available from the fiscal point of view, from the support point of view, support to new initiatives, I mean. And this project, which we are considering, envisages a package of 95 submitted proposals to different regions, each one coming with its own peculiarity. And the ICE office is proving and that new due diligence activities have been carried out in order to understand what tools are available. So we are ready, yes, we are ready in all of the sectors, even in the agro-food sector, which was probably one of the most highly damaged by the measures that were taken, dramatic measures, I would like to say, tragic measures. And obviously, I need not refer to infrastructures, mechanical infrastructures that are deeply suffering. And in the year 2016, they are suffering by sort of 16% less imports or exports that we had in previous years. We know that I believe that this is the best identity card or business card that we could ever produce to try and develop by the year 2020 new collaboration initiatives, new cooperation initiatives, and new partnerships. Grazie. Thank you. Thank you.
Несколько минут назад мы не смогли.
Now, question. Gregory, the president of LOC Youth Holding, the Asian Business Financial Center. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to explain that we work between the Eurasian Union and the Economic Union, and we are greatly interested in working with Kazakhstan. I personally work in the South Caucasian region, more specifically in Armenia. Mr. Minister, I think it is very important for me to listen to your answer. Is it true for the certification, what you said? Because I understand that the single certification area has already been established, and this is an important success, I believe. But as for the time being, I don't think that an important problem hasn't been solved, in that when the goods penetrated the Eurasian Union, we cannot use the single custom area. So basically the custom area is not implemented. We cannot perform basically the payment of the customs duty in one country to transport the goods down to the final destination. What is your comment on the subject? This is obviously a question to Mr. Suleimanov. This is a very interesting subject. I believe that in terms of customs duty, there's still the principle of residency. There's one single area for customs duty, but at the same time, it is true that a Russian company cannot pay, has to pay for the customs duty in Russia, cannot penetrate Belarus unless customs duty are paid. Well, we have tried to solve this problem when we tried of the new Eurasian Code. So this is a problem that has to do with the clearance, customs clearance. There are many problems that have to do with taxes. We still have to find a solution so as that customs duty can be paid in Belarus, for example, even when goods are paid to other countries, members to the Union. So the problem is not being solved. This is still an outstanding issue. There's also an administration problem. There's a problem with the currency. We still have to consider whether this is to be considered as an import in Belarus or in Russia. So it should be a transaction with Belarus. So we understand that this is still an outstanding issue, but you have to understand that this is a difficulty. We have to solve other problems. There are still outstanding problems, and we cannot have the custom clearance problem solved. There's a working group that gathers on a regular basis, and entrepreneurs should lend a ear to us and contribute to us. More questions? Good morning. My name is Parov. I'm a student at the La Sapienza University in Rome. I'm representing the FS group in Italy. My question is as follows. So what do you think are the possibilities for Azerbaijan to be involved into this Eurasian Forum? Because I believe that Azerbaijan is a strategic country which plays a key role between Europe and Asia. My second question is as follows. Silk Road. From China to Europe, it travels through Kazakhstan. What do you think Azerbaijan? What do you think of the Azerbaijan can play? I don't know whether Mr. Shokin can answer this question. Well, as to the Silk Road, there certainly grew good opportunities, as Mr. Suleimanov just said. The Eurasian Union covers part of the Silk Road. And there are a whole set of problems, so much so that in Kazakhstan, the beginning of October, a forum was held between Russia and Kazakhstan, and the president of Kazakhstan, Nazarov, talked extensively about the project of the unified company for logistics and transport that should gather together three countries, Belarus, Russia, and Kazakhstan. So three countries, three different corporations, public companies, state-owned companies should incorporate this unified corporation. It should act as a coordinator in logistics at the beginning, but it'll have its own vehicles or means in the future. This is to be seen as an attempt to connect China to Europe by means of a cooperation among these three countries. At that meeting, we talked also about the possibility to build a highway between Western China and Europe. The part of the highway in Kazakhstan has already been built. Russia should play a more active role so as to complete its part of the highway, so as to reach Belarus and reach the ports on the Baltic Sea, more specifically the Russian ports. So to be part of the Silk Road project, each country has its role to play. Each country should develop its own infrastructures in the common project. President Putin has proposed to develop certain links, the energy link, for example. I remember that last year during the St. Petersburg Forum, Japanese investors proposed to establish an energy link between in collecting South Korea, Mongolia, Russia energy producers. The second link that President Putin had proposed is the transport link. There are really state-of-the-art ideas that have been put to the fore. The Americans that were involved in the St. Petersburg Forum, that own a number of venture capital corporations, proposed the Hyperloop project with trains traveling at very high speed and traveling on a vacuum. This is obviously a wonderful challenge with a lot of technical problem. 1,000 kilometers per hour, this is the speed. The problem is how to brake, so as not to bypass the final destination country. Last year, the International Chamber of the Silk Road was incorporated, which is going to be presented next week in Moscow. Certain companies and associations from Russia, ours included, are part of that. Well, this chamber is growing importantly. There are some 60 countries that are member to it through their associations of industrialists and entrepreneurs. One of the main theme of this project, this international project, is promoting infrastructural projects. Including, for example, the fund for the Silk Road, the new bank for development, and then there are other banking institutions that are the traditional ones to be involved. There are also bilateral institutions, such as, for example, the Fund for Direct Investment between Russia and China. There's a fund for the development in the Far East. And there is another loop that was mentioned, and this is a loop that is often referred to. It is the e-commerce loop, involving obviously electronic technology for the exchange of data and also for the exchange of projects. And that includes another possibility to foster trade. There are a number of difficulties to be still overcome. in the field of the Eurasian Union. But in Russia, e-commerce, online commerce is developing very swiftly. And I believe that in the next decade, some 70–80% of the goods sold are going to travel online. Our traditional retailers are very worried and concerned. They believe that e-commerce companies enjoy certain benefits because they don't have to pay VAT and they don't have to comply with many other rules. But obviously, these concerns will be adequately considered, but we have to grant for regular and fair competition. Now, to refer back to the Silk Road project, I can only say that this project affects many countries, including Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan, indeed, is part of the Chamber of the Silk Road, as well as Georgia, so not only the Eurasian Economic Union countries, but other as well. Everybody is invited to be part of this chamber, all European countries as well as the Central Asian, Southern Asian countries. There was another request for the floor, I believe. Well, the question concerned the involvement of Azerbaijan in the Verona Forum. Well, I believe that this question should be addressed to the organizers, because obviously nothing prevents Azerbaijan being involved in the next edition, because we have a very friendly relationship with Azerbaijan. We're talking about the large Eurasia, and there's a question that we have to ask to Professor Fallico. Where is the border to this large Eurasia? Yesterday we referred to Shanghai as the most extreme point, but is Singapore to be considered part of this Eurasian area? Well, there's still debate is still ongoing, because we haven't quite understood whether Singapore is to be considered an island or the southernmost point of the European continent. And this is a problem that we have to solve not at a theoretical level, but at practical level. So if Singapore is ready to be taken on board, Singapore can be taken on board. But there's also the old slogan with mentioning Europe going from Lisbon to Vladivostok. So Vladivostok should be involved as well. There's another request for the floor. Accent Capital delegate, a question for Mr. Shokin. What are the possibilities to attract foreign investment given the present situation? I'm referring to investments being made in a Russian company. What do you think about the possibility to use the equity of these companies? Well, the Russian companies are ready to be involved in the stock exchange and to start the IPO, but the many stock exchanges are not very lively. I saw many London banks, because I was in London before on my way to Verona, and I saw that in London many banks are thinking about the opportunity to maybe not to change their headquarters, but to diversify their operations, because some of them are thinking to moving their offices in Frankfurt. Now, referring to the Eurasian project, well, then can be set in Hong Kong or Shanghai. On top of that, and I hope that Mr. Suleimanov allows me to make some advertisement for Azerbaijan at the trade fair to be held in Azerbaijan next year in 2017. Well, after the fair, there's going to be another activity in Astana. And there are no players being involved in the competition battlefield. Moscow has been wishing for quite a number of years to become the center for international finance. Up until recently, a lot of work was put into that. Institutions such as the central bank and others are certainly required, and you also have to have the willingness on the part of the investors to work in these cities. So I believe that the Moscow Stock Exchange can be an active player, because all the legislation ruling the activity of the Moscow Stock Exchange are no worse than the ones ruling the London Stock Exchange. So foreign investors are more than welcome. Both for securities and equity, and for the investment in manufacturing. Much reference was made, a lot of reference was made to the possibility to relocate Italian businesses in Russia. Well, this is considered as one of the criteria that determine the potential for export. This is not just a shift of technology. It doesn't just grant the possibility to sell the product of the new technologies in Russia. The new technologies are there to pave the way to new markets, to open up new markets. In December 2014, the situation changed dramatically, and the possibilities to operate on third countries for the companies incorporated as joint ventures or co-production, well, these possibilities have been widened up. So much so that many American companies with their businesses and plants in Russia are exporting from Russia to China, for example. Because of fluctuations in the exchange rate, we might have the number of problems, but there are again many companies coming to Russia, establishing their branches in Russia, wishing to export as starting from our country, from the plants in our country. This is something that our partners should consider. This is yet another option. Foreign companies manufacturing their products in Russia enjoy the right to receive or to enjoy all benefits that Russian companies enjoy, all the benefits that are based on national and local legislations. And this proves the fact that we are more than willing to see foreign investment come to us and establish their businesses in Russia and invest money and be involved into shareholding. Now, probably there's the room for just one last question. My name is Franco Grossi, State University of Architecture and Engineering in Kazakhstan. I have a question for Minister Timur Süleymanov. Earlier on, you said that many things have been achieved within the Eurasian Economic Union, but very little was done outside of the Eurasian Economic Union. I'm very interested in the relationship between Italy and Russia. My proposal is the following. I think that we should start making little steps, as President Prodi was referring to yesterday, and President Moretti reiterated the same approach, the importance of the same approach. So little steps, small steps, i.e. cooperations between Italy and Russia. Made in Russia and made in Italy, basically. Let me quote an example for the sake of clarity. Our university was the only one being invited to the Biennale of Architecture in Venice, where we have presented the pipeline of woodwork in Russia. Russian engineers indeed can build buildings in environment ranging between -40 and +40 degrees centigrade. So what we are still lacking is creativity, design that are typical features of Made in Italy. In Kazan, there are companies manufacturing helicopters and airplanes and lorries, and there again, a cooperation would be fruitful. President Putin, when he wanted to have his presidential car built, found a lot of problems in terms of design of his state car. Well, as Italians, we enjoy certain gifts, i.e. the gift of design, whereas in Russia you have other gifts. You have raw materials which we don't have. You have major engineering universities. You have many energy resources. Why shouldn't we establish some kind of cooperation? Why shouldn't we start again, a strong cooperation between Italy and Russia? Thank you for this very nice proposal. Well, there is a government committee, which is chaired over by Mr. Gogovich. In Russia, there's an inborn sense for beauty, as is true in Italy. If you ask the Russian delegates what kind of dress they use, well, most of them will say that they are wearing Italian clothes. We enjoy beauty, as Italian partners do. Now, on a more serious note, to promote Russian ideas abroad and to promote Russian ideas within Russia, design is certainly what we lack, is often what we lack, because at times Russian designers, again, let me down. I don't like walking around Moscow at night because the fashion designers in Moscow did something incredible, and I'm sure that Italians were not involved. So I would kindly invite you to get in touch with the Moscow authorities so as to come up with more attractive proposals, so as to make Moscow more attractive. I understand why you raise your question, because because probably there are a number of mechanisms that are still too little known, are not efficiently used. Well, between rat and mouse, there's no difference. There are intergovernmental commissions that have been established for quite some time already, and with reference to the bilateral relationships between Italy and Russia, well then, I think that you should address your question to the delegates of the Italian government and the Russian government. I talked at length about the friendship existing between the Italian entrepreneurs and Russian entrepreneurs, but as to the relationship with the Eurasian Economic Union or Commission, well, I think that we should start right from the beginning, i.e. we should start on political consultation, for example, technical consultation, to then move on to other subjects that are so attractive as creativity and design. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I believe we should close this session. The subject obviously is one that could be dealt with for endless time, but there are other sessions to be held, so I would like to thank you for your kind attention, and we shall meet again in this room after the coffee break. Thank you very much to all the speakers and to all the public in attendance. Thank you.